Hello, and welcome to Booked Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for adventurous readers across all genres. I'm your host, Kathleen, a collections librarian.
I'm your host, James, a reference librarian.
And I'm your host, Kat, a children's librarian.
And today we are talking about the books we are excited for this summer.
We're going to be providing a roundtable discussion of books we have read that we think make great summer reads and look ahead to some summer releases we're really excited about. But before that, we have a podcast announcement with James.
Yes, so this is the last episode of Booked Solid this season. Thank you everyone so much for listening. And we just would like to ask you if you have a moment to take our short survey that we have linked in the episode description. It is going to help us moving forward, improve the podcast, and see what kind of changes you all would like to see us kind of implement. And we're really happy to get that feedback from you. So if you've got a moment, we'd love to hear your feedback.
All right, so let's just get started. First off, we're doing books we recommend. These are books that were already released and that we've already read. Kat, why don't you get us started?
All right, I'm so excited to talk about my first recommendation. That book is Greta and Walden by Rebecca K. Riley. This book previously released in its home country of Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2021 and is releasing in the US and the UK this year. In Greta and Walden, we follow the antics and hijinks of the two titular main characters who are siblings and part of this large, extended Russian Maori family. They deal with heartbreak, unrequited love, family drama, and sort of navigating work in a society that doesn't value their sort of aspirations, which is academics, essentially. I recommend this book highly to anyone who's looking for something funny to read. It's really well written, and I think humor is actually very difficult to come across well in print. I think actors bring a lot of humor, but sometimes in books I find humor falls a little flat, and this book had me actively laughing out loud. I think if you liked the TV show Schitt's Creek, you're really going to like Greta and Walden, and I'm going to be pushing this book on everyone.
All right, that sounds like a really great book. I love humor in books, and I agree that it's so hard to do it well sometimes, so I'm really excited to look at that one.
All right, I guess I'll go next here. I have a recommendation that is of the science fiction variety. It is Exordia by Seth Dickinson. So I'm a major science fiction fan, and I was really excited when I found out that Dickinson was writing a book about aliens that was described as Michael Crichton meets Marvel's Venom, which just didn't seem like a combination that I would have imagined possible. Exordia follows Anna, who is a survivor of genocide who was burdened by the actions that she took to survive. And she's become estranged from her family and is currently living in New York City as a refugee. Her life takes a really bizarre turn when she is on a walk in Central Park and encounters Cicerin, who is a large multi-headed serpent alien who is currently snacking on turtles in Central Park, but quickly stops doing that to tell Anna that she's actually come to Earth seeking a weapon that must be kept out of the hands of her people by any means necessary. She's also here for Anna specifically, who's sort of the key to all of this. This book ramps up extremely quickly from the kind of like Men in Black funny story of there's an alien in your home and you've got to keep it hidden to a apocalyptic save the world style mission that's somehow firmly rooted in actual science, a lot of math, and pretty detailed military strategy. This combination, it blew me away. Definitely for science fiction fans to pick up and take a look. It's also a longer book, so good to read over the summer.
All right, so I wanted to recommend Eastbound by Maëlys de Kerangal. And it is a book in French that was originally published in 2012, but it was actually translated by Jessica Moore and came out in 2023, made a lot of best of lists last year. And it's a small book. You can really read it in an afternoon. So it's great if you're looking for something, kind of a lazy summer afternoon, and you want to get transported to a completely different world. Not in the sense James is talking about science fiction, but in this case to the Trans-Siberian Railway. And this is like an adventure story that takes place over a few days. It follows the story of Alyosha, a 20-year-old Russian conscript who's trying to desert the army as he travels on a train heading east. So he is not cut out for this. He is trying to get away. He's just so desperate to find an escape. So when he finds his opening, he just starts hiding in different places in the train, and he meets Hélène, who has her own sleeping compartment there. They have absolutely nothing in common. She's a 35-year-old French woman who's leaving her Russian lover. She doesn't speak a word of Russian, and so they just communicate through hand gestures, nonverbal cues. There's so much tension because you know that they can't fully communicate what they're feeling, what they need, but there's enough between them that she understands his desperation to be hidden, and she becomes kind of complicit in this plan to hide him. So it is so thrilling, and you never know what's going to happen. Even though it is a book in translation, and I think sometimes you have this question of will the emotion of the original text carry through. It's a fantastic translation. I was completely invested in this story, and I think it's a great read that I would recommend to everyone.
I'm definitely going to be picking that up.
Yeah, I'm picking that up as well.
My next pick is only similar to Eastbound in that it is also short. Otherwise, it also has nothing in common, like the two main characters of Eastbound. And that is The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. I think Montell sort of made a name for herself when she came out with Cultish a few years ago, which looks at the language of high control groups. In The Age of Magical Overthinking, she takes a look at various cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias and the recency illusion, to examine how the way our brain has these cognitive biases intersects with algorithms and the way that we intake news in our 24-hour news cycle to sort of create this atmosphere where truth becomes a bit more flexible. That sounds really heavy, but it's actually incredibly light and breezy. Montell also has a good sense of humor in a rather self-deprecating way, so she never feels like she is, I would say, making fun of people who might fall for misinformation. She instead points at her own lapses in judgment and makes it easy to connect to these stories in a real personal way. I found myself thinking about my own use of social media while reading this book, and I think no better time than the summer, honestly, to think about our relationships to technology, and maybe if you're on vacation, put the phone down for a little bit.
That sounds really good. I've got one here that is probably the closest thing that I have here for a classic beach read. Here, it's Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This is a evergreen book. It is so popular with book groups and people here at the library, and I finally got a chance to pick it up and read it this year. It's a great book if you like stories that are told well and also have intelligent octopi in them, whose perspectives you can drop into from time to time. It's about an older woman named Tova who lives alone, having lost her husband more recently and her son in an accident when he was a teen. She's now working as a janitor at a local aquarium where, unbeknownst to her, a friendly and curious octopus nearing the end of his lone life is going to help solve a decades-long mystery in a touching story of family and community, and it's just a lovely book.
I love octopi. I really need to pick this one up.
That's great. I did not expect that an octopus would be helping to solve a decades-long mystery, which is such a great pitch. All right, so next book I wanted to recommend is Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. I will say I was trying to go for beach read. This is perhaps not quite a beach read because it is about a smog that descends and food scarcity and...
I love this book so much, so I'm glad you're talking about it.
It's some depressing subject matter. It is the most fascinating book, though, and a really particular type of story, unlike anything I had ever read before. It's so passionate about food, and the descriptions of food are probably just the most incredible part to me. So it's basically about this chef who is escaping her dying career in a dreary city to take a job at a mountaintop colony, which in this world of smog and all of these terrible things happening, it's kind of this oasis, this incredible place where there is no smog. There are blue skies. There are the most decadent, amazing foods available to her, and everything that she can cook is basically from her wildest dreams. But of course, there is a dark side. And so she has this very enigmatic employer, and she's not fully aware of his plans for her or why she's been chosen, because while a good chef, she's not really the amazing chef that she's portrayed herself as in her resume. And so it quickly becomes obvious to her that there is more at stake. He has a daughter who is basically a scientific genius. And I was just so fascinated by seeing their relationship develop and all of the There are a lot of moral quandaries. There's a lot going on because, of course, they're in this land of such privilege while everyone else is suffering. But it is an incredible book, so fascinating, of a possibility of a not too distant future, but such a love letter to food and such a good read.
I loved Land of Milk and Honey, and I just want to second that recommendation before I hit my third pick. There are scenes in that book that I think that have stuck with me months later.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my last pick is probably my least light read, but I do think it still counts as a beach read because it is set on an island, so we're going to say it counts.
Nice.
And that book is Clear by Karis Davies. This book has a bit of setup to explain, but bear with me, it pays off. It is set in 1840s Scotland during the Highland clearances, which is when essentially rich landowners kicked off the peasants who'd been working that land for generations to replace them with much more profitable sheep. This had a long-lasting impact on Scotland to the present day. So in the book, we have an impoverished Presbyterian minister who, in an act of desperation, takes a job to go to a remote island off the coast of Scotland to evict the one person who lives there. When he arrives on the island, pretty soon he falls off of a cliff and is then taken in and taken care of by the person he has been sent there to evict. They also don't speak the same language. So this is a book that is about connection, it's about care, it's about our relationships to the place where we live. It's very short, and I found it deeply compelling because I really wanted to know how these two people who were forming a deep friendship were going to resolve this conflict at the very heart of it. Highly recommend.
That sounds great. I feel like now it sounds like I'm really into books where people don't speak the same language, but I am so on board with this.
Well, speaking of being on board with things, this is a book about a bunch of people who have been thrown off board because my last recommendation here is The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder by David Grann.
Elegantly done.
So yeah, you know, if Remarkably Bright Creatures was something that I'd like to read on a beach somewhere, if I picked up this book and started reading it on a beach, I would close it and I'd go head as far inland as possible because this is a riveting nonfiction book. It is an account of the ill-fated journey of the HMS Wager, which was an English warship whose mission was to raid a Spanish treasure galleon, but instead wound up shipwrecked in a desolate region near Cape Horn. The resulting mutiny and struggle for survival, as well as the horrifying journey to the disastrous wreck itself and the eventual dueling accounts of what actually even happened during this whole event from the perspective of the mutineers and the loyal sailors who survived the situation. When that whole word of that situation reaches the Admiralty over in England, it is a truly remarkable accounting of these events and how people were trying to spin them to their own advantage and to get the press on their side and the public on their side and to try and present their best faces while covering up things and things like that. A truly remarkable story, a must-read for people who are interested in like 18th century naval life. There's a lot about that. Stories of survival and what happens when people are sacrificed for national ambitions.
You sold me. I'm about to get on board The Wager.
Don't
nice.
do it. Don't do it. Spoiler alert.
It does sound like a good book, but yes, I will not read it on a boat. All right, so my last pick is a YA book, The Bad Ones by Melissa Albert. We've actually covered Melissa Albert on the podcast before in the first season with the Hazelwood. So she does these kinds of like creepy, almost David Lynchian suburbia stories where super weird things happen, but I just love how she captures like the teenage experience and then makes it weird. So in this one, it starts out in the course of a single winter's night, 4 people vanish without a trace. And so one of these people is the main character, Nora's estranged best friend, Becca. And they've had this falling out in recent months, and something strange happens, as you're aware of pretty early on, but you don't know what, about 6 months before. And so there are kind of allusions to that, kind of some strange things that were already set into motion when they were kids. Nora and Becca played this thing called the Goddess Game. And so all of these clues that Becca has left for Nora to discover after she's gone missing all kind of hint at some of these childhood games they played and some of their dark shared past. So it's, you know, it's just a lot of fun if you like semi-toxic friendships and the occult, this kind of supernatural element that goes into this horror mystery story. I love Melissa Albert's writing, so I'll basically read anything she writes, and it's it just immediately sucks you in because it's so welcoming with how well written it is, even when it gets quite spooky and dark.
Ooh, that actually segues perfectly into my first pick for our upcoming releases to be excited about, because it is another spooky book. I love reading spooky books in the summer. Summer to me, like Halloween, of course, is the most spooky time of the year, but the summer is my favorite time to read horror novels. And my first pick is a summer-themed horror novel. It's called The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This is going to be releasing on June 11th. I'm a big Liz Moore fan. She writes literary thrillers. Her last book was Long Bright River, which was incredible. And in The God of the Woods, we follow the aftermath of a disappearance at a sleepaway camp in the 1970s. And it's not only, any camper that goes missing, but it's actually the daughter of the ultra-rich family who own the land the camp is on. So we get the perspective of her best friend at the camp, of the camp counselor, and of her mother, who are dealing with the fact that the child has gone missing, and she is the second child in the family to have gone missing on that land. It is an absolute thrill ride. I got a chance to read it. I read it in 2 days because I really couldn't bring myself to do anything else. If you love a thriller, this one's going to be for you.
That's completely sold it for me. I'm going to immediately pick that up the second I get a chance. Something I did actually also get a chance to read early before the general release was my first pick, which is The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. That is actually releasing on July 16th. And you might recognize the name Lev Grossman. He's the author of The Magicians. You might recognize that from the TV show The Magicians. But this is a fantasy story that takes place in the well-worn setting of Arthurian Britain. That mythical time period of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. The story follows our hero Colum, who's a young knight who is seeking to join the ranks of King Arthur and his host. But when he arrives at Camelot to swear fealty, he learns that the age of heroes he hoped to be a part of has ended. In fact, he just missed it. 2 weeks prior, most of the Knights of Camelot were slaughtered in a battle. King Arthur was reportedly killed based on the injuries that were reported, and the handful of knights that remain have been left broken and are waiting for the end to come. Colum pleads for a miracle, and he is granted one final quest with the last remaining heroes of Camelot to try and save the realm. What Lev Grossman has done here is not just fully leverage the mythical trappings and stylings of Arthurian legend, bringing a world full of contradictions, magic, pagan faiths, and Christianity, all of these things fighting for supremacy, to life, but he's also done it in a way that makes it feel like this is a world that feels as if it is poised to leap to the next age and leave all the characters within it behind. There's an excellent cast of characters, a really intriguing story, some really emotional moments in here. This is one that fantasy fans and fans of Arthurian legends will honestly not want to miss.
I have been so excited about this one ever since you mentioned it to me.
Repeatedly
Been excited about it.
All right. So, speaking of reading scary books over the summer, I'm also a really big fan of that. So the first book I wanted to talk about is Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, which comes out on June 11th. So I first became familiar with Tremblay's works through A Head Full of Ghosts, which is probably one of the most terrifying books I've ever read. He does creepy really well, and I loved the premise of this book that's coming out. I have not read it in advance, so I really don't know what to expect. But I know the premise is that in June 1993, there were these young filmmakers who spent 4 weeks making a horror movie called Horror Movie, which was notorious and disturbing, and actually only 3 of the film scenes were ever even released to the public. But nonetheless, it's become some kind of cult classic, and 3 decades later, Hollywood is pushing for a reboot. So the man who played the thin kid in this movie is the only surviving cast member, which is the detail that immediately stuck out to me because they were young filmmakers 30 years ago and he's the only one left alive. So I already know bad things happened. So I'm super intrigued by that detail. But he also remembers all of the secrets buried within the original screenplay, the bizarre events of the filming, the real life tragedy that resulted. So I'm a sucker for spooky movies and the lore around them, and I definitely want to know the secrets of this story.
Wow, that sounds terrifying. And now let's turn from the terror of fiction to the terror of real life.
Oh.
My second pick is an upcoming release This already released in the UK in March, but it's coming to the US on June 14th, and that's Code Dependent, Living in the Shadow of AI by Madhumita Murgia. This book was nominated for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction this year, which is how it hit my radar. And what I love and am enjoying so far about this book the most is that it is a person-centered look at the effects of automation in our lives. So instead of looking at Silicon Valley and how AI is sort of designed, we look at the lives of, for example, data workers in the global south who train the AI that is potentially going to run something like a driverless car. We look at women who discover that their likenesses have been used in explicit deepfakes online. And Murgia is very interested in how there's a question of whether or not we are giving away our moral conscience, we are abdicating it to machines we do not fully understand yet at this point. I think if you live in this world, honestly, this is a book you should probably at least skim because a lot of it is very relevant to everyone, and I highly recommend it.
With the prevalence of AI and how popular use of it is becoming now, definitely, I'm definitely planning on reading this one during the summer. So my next pick is also a nonfiction selection, a little less, I'd say, serious in some ways than that, but
that's probably for the best.
It's Sing Like a Fish, How Sound Rules Life Underwater by Marina Kingdon, which is releasing on June 4th. It is a captivating exploration of how underwater animals tap into sound to survive, and a clarion call for humans to address the ways we invade these critical soundscapes from an award-winning science writer. And this came across my radar because I have friends who know that I'm very interested in the ocean in general. I love marine life books. I love learning about the life under the sea. It's all just fun, and it's fun to me. This book not only covers historical discoveries and new science and our understanding of sound in the undersea world, but it's kind of looking at how things like most people know, it's whale song is how sound is undersea. That's the limit to most people's understanding of how sound works. But it's really, there's so much more than that. Sound plays such a huge role in marine ecosystems, and to learn about how these animals live and use sound and how our activities are disrupting it seems like something that I was really interested in. Definitely for me a beach read.
I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was little, actually. I will be picking this one up for sure.
Sounds good. All right, so I guess we're on a roll with nonfiction because I also have a nonfiction book to recommend.
We're doing it.
This one is called Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV by Emily Nussbaum. And this comes out on June 25th. And I have to admit, first off, this is not a book I would pick up if it were written by literally anyone else. So Emily Nussbaum was a television critic for The New Yorker up until 2019. She won a Pulitzer Prize for criticism. And, I just love her writing. I read her previous book, I Like to Watch Arguing My Way Through the TV Revolution. And I think she has such an interesting take on TV in general. And I'm really fascinated with she's tracing the paths of reality innovation from a long line of different types of shows, game shows, prank shows, soap operas, clip shows. I remember being in, middle school and high school and really seeing reality television explode. So all of those shows from that time, Survivor became really huge. And even the things that were maybe I don't even think of as being reality shows, the precursor type things, Candid Camera or Cops or things like that. It's just so fascinating to see how these all fit into that world. Kind of the seedy world at times of reality television, but the history of it, the moral outrage, why the genre is powerful and enduring. And I think she's just going to have a lot of interesting reporting on that, a lot of observations that are really thoughtful and thought-provoking. And I'm curious what she has to say.
Yeah, the world of reality TV, despite myself not being much of a reality TV watcher, does absolutely fascinate me, especially the way it intersects with writer strikes and the cost of production for reality TV.
Exactly. And I think this book covers all of that. I'm hooked. I need to know.
I'm going to take us back to fiction. My last release is the only one I actually haven't read any of, but the premise was too intriguing for me to leave it off of this list, and that is Masquerade by O.O. Sangoyomi. This is a retelling of Hades and Persephone set in 15th century West Africa. It is not fantasy, so just know that it is pure historical fiction, which is fine with me. I love historical fiction set outside of the US and Europe because I feel like we rarely see it published and promoted in English, especially something like a myth retelling. This focuses on our Persephone sort of type character, Ododo, as she goes from being a pariah in the Blacksmith's Guild to being abducted and being then placed in a very high part of court. So she goes from being someone with no power to being someone with a lot of power very quickly. It features, of course, a romance. It's Hades and Persephone. And also Persephone type character at her most morally gray. I support women's wrongs, and I'm very excited for this book.
Well, speaking of women's wrongs, my final recommendation is going to be A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, which is releasing on August 6th, so late in the summer here. Imagine like a Regency type story combined with a mystery and what I can only describe as a body horror tale. This is what you'll get. This is a retelling of The Goose Girl.
Oh, I love The Goose Girl. It's such a messed up fairy tale.
Yeah, so this story is following a young woman named Cordelia who lives with her mother, Evangeline. Evangeline is a bit overbearing as a parent. She has really strict expectations for Cordelia. You know, she wants to control how she acts. She wants to set her goals in life, which are currently to marry a rich guy. And she's also, you know, a powerful sorceress who can seize control of people's bodies and make them do and say whatever she wants. She's used this on Cordelia routinely since she's been born. When Evangeline finds a rich man to pursue for herself, Cordelia is brought along for the ride as she tries to then push back against her mother and help rescue both herself and the family that she is about to get married into. It's a scary, sometimes weirdly whimsical book that definitely fits Kingfisher's style, who has also done previous retellings and reworkings of things such as What Moves the Dead as a retelling of Fall of the House of Usher. So a very good one. I had a chance to pick this up early and I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Sounds good. Love T. Kingfisher.
Same.
Yes.
All right, for my last book, I wanted to recommend Nicked by M.T. Anderson, which comes out on July 23rd. All I needed to know was that this was M.T. Anderson's adult debut, and I was already like, yes, let's get it. I've loved his books since Feed, which I think came out in like 2002. He has written so many books that are so different from each other, too, which I think is great. Landscape with Invisible Hand was another one I loved. He's done the Octavian Nothing books. So he's dominated the YA space and the middle grade space for a while. And so I'm really curious to see what he does with this adult style book. It actually sounds like it might be perfect for fans of like The Many Assassinations of Samir, the Seller of Dreams, because this is a historical romp, an adventure story. This one is set in 1087, and it is about a pox sweeping the Italian port city of Bari. But before that sounds too serious, what happens is that there is a monk who is visited by St. Nicholas in his dreams. He interprets that as a call to action, and it basically leads him on a quest to steal St. Nicholas's bones. So
very good.
I know,
I'm so
right?
excited
Like at
about
that
this
point,
book.
I'm just like, oh, he's stealing bones. So these bones, these 700-year-old bones, are rumored to weave a mysterious liquid that can heal the sick. So basically, the monk teams up with a treasure hunter who is known for, quote, liberating holy relics from tombs. And they go off on this adventure to recover the bones and hopefully heal some sick people. So everything about this sounds delightful. It's based on real historical accounts, but, you know, it's also obviously a genre-defying adventure story full of romance and wonder. And I imagine this will be the most fun book I read this summer.
I've got to read this. I have to.
M.T. Anderson is so good at historical fiction specifically. I really love the Octavian Nothing books. He does really careful research into not just like what was happening, but also how people wrote and talked.
Yeah.
So that makes me even more excited for this one.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds so good.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special bonus summer reads episode and for joining us on season 5 of Book Solid. Book Solid season 6 will premiere on September 27th, where we will be covering James, the book by Percival Everett.
Thank you. I was very confused.
We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.